par les enfants des détenus politiques arbitrairement en Tunisie. Alors, cette conférence, c'est le seul moyen pour les enfants des détenus pour exposer la cause de leurs parents injustement harcelés, détenus par le régime de Saied. Les instruments internationaux relatifs aux droits de l'homme, en particulier l'article 9 de la Déclaration universelle des droits de l'homme et le pacte international relatif aux droits civils et politiques, protègent le droit à la liberté individuelle. Lorsqu'il est impossible d'invoquer une base juridique pour la privatisation de liberté, est maintenu en détention après l'exécution de sa peine ou malgré une loi d'amnistie qui lui est applicable. Lorsque la privation de liberté résulte de l'exercice des droits et libertés garantis par la DUBDH et le PIDCP, tels que le droit à la liberté d'opinion et d'expression, de réunion pacifique et d'association. Dans le monde arabe, des milliers de personnes sont victimes de détentions arbitraires. Les victimes sont généralement privées de leurs droits fondamentaux dès le début de la détention. Arrestation sans mandat, détention au secret, sans leur permettre d'accès à un avocat ou de contacter leur famille, période de garde à vue prolongée illégalement pendant lesquelles la victime est torturée psychologiquement et physiquement dans des cas, dans le but d'exhorter des aveux ainsi que des procès expéditifs. Le gouvernement tunisien arrête et poursuit souvent toutes les voix dissidentes et contestataires comme celle des défenses des droits de l'homme, opposants politiques, journalistes, manifestants pacifiques, en représailles pour avoir fait usage de leur droit à la liberté d'expression, de réunion pacifique et d'association. Par ailleurs, des milliers de détentions de citoyens sont également victimes de détentions arbitraires lorsqu'ils sont privés des garanties fondamentaux relatives au procès équitable. Et là, pour en terminer mon introduction, je cite un dicton d'un écrivain américain d'origine allemande, Charles Bukowski, qui a dit un jour « La tristesse est causée par l'intelligence. Plus tu comprends certaines choses, plus tu souhaiterais ne pas les avoir compris, malheureusement. » On souhaite la bienvenue à tous les intervenants. Juste une petite introduction pour présenter nos chers invités. Maître Rodney Dixon, avocat à Londres, représentant des familles des détenus arbitrairement en Tunisie devant la Cour internationale et la Cour africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples. Welcome, Mr. Madame Yusra Khariji, fille du président du Parlement légitime, Monsieur Rached Khariji, nommé Rached Ghannouchi, 82 ans. Vous vous rendez compte, 92 ans. A été nommé l'une des 100 personnes les plus influentes au monde par le Time en 2012 et parmi les 100 meilleurs penseurs mondiaux de la politique étrangère et a reçu le prix Chatham House en 2012 aux côtés de l'ancien président tunisien Mons Marzouki par le prince André, duc de York, pour les compromis réussis obtenus chacun pendant la transition démocratique en Tunisie en 2016. Il a reçu aussi le prix Jamnalal Bajaj pour la promotion des valeurs gandhienne en dehors de l'Inde, le 13 novembre 2019. Rached Ghannouchi a survécu de peu à un vote de censure après que 97 députés ont voté contre lui le 30 juillet, soit moins que les 109 nécessaires pour l'évincer du poste de président de la Chambre. On a aussi avec nous M. Jaza Sherif, fils de Mme Shaima Issa, qui est une poétesse, écrivaine, journaliste et militante des droits de l'homme, ancienne détenue arbitrairement pour son opposition au coup d'État anticonstitutionnel du 25/7/2021. M. Elyes Chaouachi, fils de M. Ghazi Chaouachi, né le 5 février 1963 au Bardo. C'est un avocat et homme politique tunisien, élu député à l'Assemblée des représentants du peuple lors des élections législatives de 2014. Il est cofondateur, membre du bureau politique et vice-secrétaire général du courant démocrate, puis secrétaire général de mars 2016 à avril 2019. En 2020, il devient ministre des Domaines et de l'État et des Affaires foncières, puis ministre de l'Équipement, de l'Habitat et de l'Aménagement territorial par intérim, détenu pendant plus d'une année arbitrairement. Madame Kaouther Ferjani, fils de l'ancien député et activiste des droits de l'homme, Monsieur Saied Ferjani. Je donne la parole, on commence par Maître Dixon. Vous avez la parole, Maître.
Thank you very much. And good afternoon. We are here in Geneva this afternoon at the UN Human Rights Council, which is currently in session. It meets 3 times a year. This is the first meeting of 2024, and obviously a very important one, where the key human rights issues of the year are on the agenda. We are here to ensure that Tunisia is placed as high as possible on the priorities of the UN to address the fundamental human rights violations that you've been hearing about and that you'll hear more of today. Welcome to all of those who are following online. We are here because we want to convey a very strong message to the UN about the need for action in respect of the transgressions that are currently unfolding. As the legal team acting for families, and you'll hear from the families very soon about directly what has happened to them, but as the legal team taking up those cases, we have sought to take several different initiatives to seek justice for what is happening. Firstly, to try and stop the violations, to stop the detentions, the mistreatment, but then also to get justice thereafter so that Tunisia as a society will be able to heal and move on without these scars. There have been some steps taken already at the UN here in Geneva. There are procedures where victims and families can apply. Those have been submitted and those are being considered. But I do wish to highlight very specifically that the UN Human Rights Council itself, as a body as a whole, is yet to take decisive action in relation to what is happening in Tunisia. The Human Rights Council has powers, they've done it in many other situations, to set up bodies to monitor what is happening, to have investigations, and to then take matters forward within the UN, to the General Assembly and to the Security Council. And these we would urge the Council to follow in the case of Tunisia. The special procedures are very important, but so is the body as a whole, the body which is responsible for human rights in the world, ensuring that Tunisia is right at the top of its agenda. We know there are many, many, many other tragedies unfolding in the world at the moment, but it's not a reason, therefore, to ignore what is happening in Tunisia. The UN has to be able to deal with all situations and ensure that its time and resources are dedicated to all victims around the world. It cannot be selective. And for too long, Tunisia has been in the shadow, and it's very important that that changes in 2024, at this session and in the sessions going ahead at the UN. We have also filed a case at the ICC on behalf of the families and the victims who are directly affected, who have been detained, put through unlawful and unfair trial proceedings, mistreated, had their rights trampled on. as well as on behalf of migrants who have died and who continue to suffer as a result of the policies of the president of Tunisia and his government. That case is at the ICC for consideration at the moment. The ICC has the power to launch an investigation because Tunisia is a state party of the ICC. And we know the case docket in The Hague is very full, but once again, that cannot be a reason to downgrade these transgressions and this suffering. All victims must be treated equally. So we are urging the ICC prosecutor to start that investigation and take up cases to at least indicate that this is happening, to at least make a statement about Tunisia and to visit there. The prosecutor has been visiting many, many places recently, and a visit to Tunisia now would be timely as well. We have also very importantly gone to Africa, to its own organs and the African Court on Human and People's Rights. We have a case filed there where the court ruled to provide interim measures. This is provisional measures, much like you've seen recently in the ICJ case concerning South Africa and Palestine. There were interim measures ordered. The African Court did exactly the same thing in the case of Tunisia, saying that those who are detained must be treated properly. They must have access to lawyers, medical treatment. They need to know what the cases are against them, and you'll hear more about that today. What is the evidence? What is the case? So that they can be treated fairly if there's anything to go forward. From what we've seen, the proceedings are a sham. There is no evidence. They are used to clamp down on democracy and silence all opposition. So the African Court has ruled in our favor already, and because the government of Tunisia has just not responded to the court, complied with the provisional measures in any way, they haven't done it, we have applied to the court for a judgment in the case, a judgment on the merits to find that Tunisia is violating the African Charter. And if that's the case, which we say it clearly should be, then we will look to take that judgment forward against the government and at the political level as well, because the African Union can then take action. We have also brought sanctions applications on behalf of individuals, in particular Saied and a number of his ministers who are individually responsible for what is happening. And there are sanctions that you can apply for in the EU, the UK, and the US, which we have put forward and which we are pursuing with those governments. So that action can be taken against the individuals directly to seek to prevent any further atrocities and have a measure of justice. All of these initiatives, and I'll go into them more if you want in question time, but all of these initiatives are there to seek to ensure that the rights of Tunisians, particularly those who are detained, are guaranteed, but also so that thereafter they can flourish in a society without the dictatorial approach that we are currently experiencing. So the cases are part of the overall campaign to ensure that democracy thrives in Tunisia. It's one part of it, it's the legal justice part, but a critical part that we are urging all of those bodies, and in particular here today, the UN, to take up and to ensure that it does not fall down and get forgotten. Because if it's forgotten, then there'll be more suffering, there'll be more injustice. It has to be front and center of what the UN is doing in Geneva today and in the months ahead. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Maître. Je donne la parole actuellement à Ghazi Cherif, tout simplement. Ghazi Cherif, c'est le fils, comme je venais de dire tout à l'heure, de Cheikh Maïssa, une activiste arrêtée juste après avoir participé à un séminaire qu'on a organisé ici à Genève pour regrouper toutes les familles politiques désarrangées ici à Genève pour essayer de trouver une issue après le coup d'État de Saied. Je vous en prie.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis Ghazi Chaouachi, le fils de Shaima Issa, universitaire, militante des droits humains, figure emblématique du Front du Salut national. Première femme à avoir été incarcérée après la Révolution, elle a passé 5 longs mois en prison avant d'être libérée le 13 juillet, accusée de complot contre la sécurité de l'État. En ce moment, ma mère n'est pas totalement libre. Elle est placée en assignation à domicile. Elle ne peut pas travailler, elle ne peut pas voyager, ni voir ses proches. Même pour consulter son médecin, elle doit avoir l'autorisation du juge. Elle est privée de ses droits comme citoyenne. Avec toutes ces restrictions, elle ne peut pas reprendre son train de vie normal. La frustration et la peur, à présent, font partie de son quotidien. Elle a été condamnée mercredi 13 décembre à 1 an de prison avec sursis par le tribunal militaire, qui l'a notamment reconnu coupable d'offense au président, suite à des déclarations faites dans les médias. Cette condamnation est basée sur le décret 54, qui a été contesté par toute la classe politique et civile tunisienne. Il est considéré par les défendeurs des droits comme une atteinte grave à la liberté d'expression, au vu des lourdes peines qu'il prévoit, dans le but de censurer la liberté d'expression des Tunisiens. En vertu de ce décret aussi, Jawher Ben Mbarak a été condamné à 6 mois de prison ferme pour des propos critiques sur les législatifs de 2022. Les prisonniers politiques, qui sont plus que 42, sous les verrous, sans droit ni procès équitable, dans des affaires montées de toutes pièces. Les conditions de détention sont cruelles pour tous les détenus, sans aucune prise en compte des valeurs de la dignité humaine, sans aucune de liberté, de démocratie, d'égalité et aucun respect des droits de l'homme. Les détenus subissent toute cette humiliation juste parce qu'ils sont opposants. La majorité ont plus que 60 ans et ont de graves problèmes de santé, mais n'ont pas le droit d'accéder aux soins nécessaires. En Tunisie, un climat de terreur est instauré. Avec le recul des droits humains, l'espace civique se resserre de plus en plus. Saied semble déterminé à faire diminuer le rôle de la société civile à travers son discours populiste et haineux. Il a su comment diviser l'opinion publique et l'alimenter contre l'élite politique pour pouvoir mettre en place un régime autocrate. La Tunisie, dans une situation financière critique, dont la population souffre de l'inflation et de graves pénuries, s'enfonce dans la dictature. Sous le régime de Kais Saied, on a perdu les valeurs de la démocratie, du pluralisme et de l'état des droits, de liberté et d'égalité. Je souhaite que tous les défendeurs de la démocratie et de l'état de liberté se mobilisent pour sauver ce qui reste de notre pays. Tous ceux qui croient en ces valeurs doivent réagir pour mettre fin à cette dérive autoritaire. Un retour au régime inclusif démocratique et la libération de tous les prisonniers sont exigés. Merci.
Merci Aziz. Jaza, excusez-moi. On donne la parole à Aziz Akremi, le fils du juge. Je peux me permettre, avant l'intervention de M. Aziz, le fils de notre cher Bechir Akremi, j'aimerais bien aussi parler de ce monsieur qui a tant donné pour la justice et la magistrature en Tunisie. M. Bechir Akremi, c'est un procureur victime de persécutions judiciaires depuis l'arrivée de Kais Saied. M. Bechir Akremi était, avant sa suspension, procureur de la République près du tribunal de première instance à Tunis. Juridiction et une compétence nationale en matière de lutte anti-corruption, de la lutte antiterroriste. M. Bechir Akremi était précédemment premier juge d'instruction auprès du même tribunal et avait été chargé d'instruire dans le cadre d'importantes affaires criminelles, dont notamment l'affaire de l'assassinat du secrétaire général du Parti unifié des Patriotes démocrates, Choukri Blaïd, Monsieur Bechir Akremi, depuis presque plus d'une année, subit des persécutions, des tortures psychologiques par un président malade psychologiquement et avec à sa botte sa ministre de la Justice, Elyes Chaouachi, qui a construit et a fabriqué tous les dossiers fomentés contre Bechir Akremi. On donne la parole à Aziz. Je vous en prie, Aziz.
Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much for that introduction. My father has also been a world-renowned anti-terrorism expert and has worked on many international cases. He himself is the judge that is most responsible for dismantling terrorist cells in Tunisia. Actually, there's no one that can make that claim. Bechir Akremi has arrested and has dismantled the most terrorist cells in Tunisia. And he has worked on many famous cases, infamous cases, including the Bardo attacks and the Sousse attacks. Today, my father sits in jail for more than 1 year on trumped-up charges. At first, the charges were relating to forming a terrorist cell, which was really absurd considering that this judge has fought terrorism all his life. This judge is UN-recognized anti-terrorism expert, yet he finds himself accused of forming terrorist cells. To understand why Saied and his regime went after Bechir Akremi is to understand that he needed to control the judiciary as one way to control the political opponents. Without Said's control over the judiciary, none of this would be possible. The coup itself would not be possible. He started off by targeting my father, and on the 11th of February 2023, he signed the order and my father was arrested. I would like to also talk about the situation of the judiciary as a whole in Tunisia and my father's colleagues. I would like to point out that recently in January, the Association of Tunisian Judges has submitted a very important testimony that highlighted some really important things. I'm just going to write it without changing it. I'm just going to translate it. The Tunisian Judge Association, which represents more than 40% of Tunisian judges. Many judges were recently suspended from their work over the last period. These judges include public prosecution, investigative judges, and courtroom judges. The suspension also included judges at the financial pole and at the anti-terrorism pole. This was done without any disciplinary, legal, or accusation directed at them. All of these decisions come from one person, the Minister of Justice, Elyes Chaouachi. All of this is in the absence of a judicial council. These random suspicions can only mean one thing, that these judges were suspended due to their judicial decisions in cases. I've also gathered the testimony of 3 other judges, third-degree judges. All of them have a career spanning more than 20 years. These judges would prefer to stay anonymous. The first one, they say, Aziz, just tell them that today in Tunisia, whoever disobeys orders is instantly fired, just like all the others. They're referring to the statement made by the Tunisian Association. The second judge says, Aziz, I envy that your father, Judge Bechir Akremi, didn't have to see how police is now walking around our courtrooms and working our cases for us. The third judge says, Aziz, my son, please don't share my name, but I was moved all the way, very far away from my hometown, just because I released a person that simply wrote a Facebook post on social media. These testimonies are not independent. They come from an entire climate of fear and prosecution directed at the judiciary. This also does not only include judges. Lawyers themselves are now being targeted. If you have a lawyer that is ready to fight for you and ready to say what needs to be said, they are prosecuted and sometimes even arrested. There are many cases of Tunisian lawyers that had this happen to them, including Aisha Hamemi, Slim Hamza, and many other names that I could not possibly include today. One other thing is that we notice a very high increase in the number of arrests based on freedom of opinion because of criticizing the president and criticizing the regime. This has all, just like Jaza mentioned, is at the back of the new laws directed at journalists and directed at private citizens who criticize the regime. I would also like to point out that despite all of this, despite all of the oppression, despite all the prosecution, despite that right now this marks more than 2 years ago, but the president himself fired 57 judges, we find that the international community is simply cooperating with this oppressive regime. In order to restore democracy to Tunisia, in order to restore economic stability, you cannot work with dictators. Autocracies cannot work and cannot be sustained long term, yet unfortunately the international community seems to have not learned from its past mistakes. There's a very important thing that's coming up recently, that it's been 1 year since my father's arrest, which marks the legal time limit for most of cases that were filed against him, which means close enough, the judges are now required to either prosecute or to dismiss the cases. And it's very important that the international community, including the UN, pay close attention to Tunisia during this period. It's not only my father, Judge Bechir Akremi, but also the parents of other political prisoners that also have their time limit coming up. This is very important because these cases, they have two options: either to dismiss and make new cases, which is already happening, or to prosecute under prompt-up charges. I would also like to point out that the whole climate in Tunisia is so scary that we are seeing a sharp rise in the use of like secret and encrypted mobile apps. All the climate in Tunisia is going steadily towards dictatorship, and we are walking backwards at the time of Ben Ali and at the time of the pre-revolution times. I would also like to say that these autocracies thrive in silence, and if we stay silent as an international community, we are simply cooperating, we are simply aiding in the oppression of these prisoners. We are aiding in the oppression of someone like my father, who worked his whole life dismantling terrorist cells, who has worked side and side in courtrooms in Tunisia and abroad, bringing justice to thousands of victims. This also would be this would show the world that anyone who is a friend of democracy is simply not welcome in the West. Thank you so much for letting me speak, and yeah, I pass to someone else. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Aziz. Aziz, j'ai juste un petit message à te passer. Tu dois être fier de ton père. Aziz, ton père, le monde de la magistrature reconnaît le professionnalisme et le travail qu'a fait votre papa pendant toutes ces décennies. C'est pour ça que ce régime sanguinaire s'acharne contre votre papa. Alors vous devez être fiers. Et tous les Tunisiens qui croient à la justice et à l'état de droit, qui doivent être fiers qu'on a une personnalité comme M. Bechir Akremi. Je passe maintenant à donner la parole à Mme Kaouther. Kaouther Ferjani, c'est la fille d'un ancien détenu politique aussi, de l'ancien Ben Ali, l'ancien régime de Ben Ali, que je connais personnellement. Saied Ferjani, il a connu des tortures sans précédent. Saied Ferjani, il a failli mourir sous la torture de Ben Ali. Et voilà que maintenant, rebelote, on recommence encore à dénoncer ces pratiques barbares, ces arrestations arbitraires. C'est pour ça que Kaouther, elle est venue ici pour dénoncer ce qui se passe à son papa. Je vous en prie.
Thank you for inviting us today. I've been doing various variations of my speeches for the last year. Unfortunately, a year later, my father's still in prison. I think it's fitting that today is happening around the Human Rights Council as it's going on, because my father has been in various forms a human rights activist since basically he was 17, 18. And it's one of the reasons that he did choose to go into politics from such a young age, because at the time it was the tyranny of Bourguiba, and then later Ben Ali. Unfortunately, in the late 80s, he was, as you've mentioned, he did go to prison. he was tortured, and years later, even when he was in the UK in exile, he stayed committed to being a human rights activist, both in the UK, but he never forgot his people in Tunisia. In the last year, my father has, for the first 10 months of his imprisonment, has had to endure some horrendous conditions, prison conditions, including sharing a cell with 120 people in appalling states, where they only shared one toilet, where they had cameras, where he was basically at the mercy of the prison on whether he gets medical treatment or not, which led many times for him to have to go to the hospital in emergency. And as with all the other prisoners, they wouldn't even have an ambulance. They'd have to be handcuffed and put in a police van despite their conditions. In the last 3 years in Tunisia, since the coup, we've seen all the gains and the wins that we've had in the last 10 years since the revolution slowly be broken down and dismantled. And in fact, not just the gains during those 10 years in the revolution, but even some pillars that we had in Tunisia that we were proud of, such as civil society. And unfortunately, the international community has watched the tyrant, Qais, not only dismantle, like I said, the gains of the last 10 years, but dismantle any positives that Tunisia has had. We've also charted into new territories, such as fascism, racism, and the incitement of hatred on black African migrants. We've seen how awful and devastating the images that have come out from the Mediterranean, coming out of Tunisia, and that's all thanks to our current racist, fascist president. One thing I think one of the main reasons I'm here, I don't want to harp on what I've been saying for the last year, is I want to ask the international community, what message are you sending people in our region? For years, ever since I've been, I'm a lot older than I may seem, but for decades, all we've heard from the West is democracy, human rights, freedom, and it's constantly repeated. Well, Tunisia did that. And then you allowed a man to break it all down and actually make it a lot worse and put the people who helped create the democracy and freedom in Tunisia put in prison. And so I really just, at this moment, I'm baffled as to what exactly you're sending a message to the average person in Tunisia and in the region, and what message you're sending to despots. Because not only do they get to carry on with their tyranny, but they get rewarded for it. We've seen it. We've seen EU money. We've seen a lack of accountability. And even with regards to the UN, we have called for them to visit our prisoners at least. And they're constantly being delayed. And right now I want to know to what end. And I'd just like to end this with a letter my father wrote 2 months into his imprisonment, and I've actually not read it before, but I think it's fitting today. We translated it, and he says, "To the free people of the world, we must not feel a false sense of assurance that dictatorship will not return at any moment. Despotism has no morals and no justice, and does not recognize any rights. Rather, it sees itself as a nation, as the state. Free people such as myself refuse to accept such a thing, even if they have to sacrifice their lives. The free world must stand by innocent free people who are being accused of conspiracy. I reject the system and this equation that the coup and the coup leader wish to impose and turn into a fait accompli with the help of what he calls honorable judges and faithful citizens, who are nothing more but a weapon used against the innocent free people in this country. we call on all the free people around the world and believers in human rights and democracy to take a clear stance against the oppressive authoritarianism and heinous racism, and with democracy and human rights. And he signed it, Saied Ferjani, Member of Parliament, political prisoner. I just want to end with, my father has always been a free man, and even in prison he's free, which is why this is what he refers to him as. And I really hope that after today we can get some support from those that actually have been lecturing us on human rights. Thanks.
Merci beaucoup, Kaouther. Je donne la parole maintenant à Madame Yusra Khariji. Juste, je me permets aussi de donner deux petits mots sur la personnalité de son père, Monsieur Rached Ghannouchi. Rached Ghannouchi, c'est une personnalité que je disais emblématique de la vie politique en Tunisie. C'est une personnalité respectée par tout le monde. C'est un penseur, c'est un écrivain, c'est un homme qui a laissé des empreintes là où il a vécu. Et voilà que Qaïs Saïd, pour le récompenser, non seulement il a arrêté le travail du Parlement tunisien, mais il a eu le culot, excusez-moi le terme, parce que je ne trouve pas un autre terme pour m'exprimer, de le mettre en prison, un homme de 82 ans, sans aucune pitié. Voilà, je vous laisse la parole.
Shukran. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here, and to those who are following online. I'd also like to thank my fellow speakers, the children of political leaders, civil society activists, judges, and who have been advocating for the release of their mothers and fathers, and who, despite their differences and diverse backgrounds, are united in their determination to ensure that those who perpetrate human rights violations in Tunisia do not enjoy impunity and are brought to justice. And thank you, Rodney, for your expertise and help in ensuring this. I would also like to thank the organizers, the Association for Victims of Torture in Tunisia, for the pioneering work that they have been doing, not just recently since the coup, but in the pre-revolution days, and their important work in ensuring that there is no impunity for human rights violations, and their perpetrators, particularly the famous case against the interior minister at the time, under Ben Ali. It is sad that, in my teens, I remember following that, and it is sad that now, after the revolution and after a decade of democracy, we are back to those days, and it's sad that the work of this association and the work of civil society activists in Tunisia, who are now bravely trying to resist the return of dictatorship. Sadly, this activism and these violations are not just in the past, and we are seeing now the same violations being repeated. Of course, that decade was not perfect, was not ideal, but there was undeniable significant progress in establishing the legislation, the institutions, the mechanisms that would prevent systematic human rights violations. It is also sad to see that the same countries that, after the revolution, recognized the folly of supporting and turning a blind eye to dictatorships in our region with the hope that they could bring stability while stifling freedoms and denying the legitimate rights and aspirations of their citizens to dignity. We see the same countries now going back to turning a blind eye of worse, supporting dictators while they are engaged in systematic human rights violations, and by doing so, they are also betraying their own professed values of democracy and universal human rights. Of course, we cannot ignore the current context where everyone in the region and around the world is preoccupied with the genocide in Gaza. And for millions around the region, it is a compounded tragedy because they are not only witnessing this genocide and ethnic cleansing and starvation live on their screens and social media, but they are also seeing their dictators exploiting this to try and legitimize their own dictatorship. And we see dictators like Saied trying to present themselves as champions of Palestinians while offering nothing but empty rhetoric and failing to even vote for a ceasefire in Gaza, while relishing the the double standards and hypocrisy that we see and the failure of the world to do something about what's happening. And we see dictators like Saied arguing that they should not be, we should not be seeking ideas like democracy and universal human rights, which he never believed in. So for us, it is a compounded tragedy. And however, we should not allow what's happening to, let us, give up on democracy in Tunisia and our region, because the two are not separate. And it is also so what we are doing here is to ensure that Tunisia is not forgotten, that we continue to put pressure on the regime of Saied and his allies, and to ensure that perpetrators of human rights violations do not enjoy impunity, and that's why we have used legal avenues that are available to us. And we also are calling on the European Union, the UN, and all these institutions to prove their commitment to these values and not to give any legitimacy to dictators like Saied, who have not only dismantled democracy in Tunisia, while promising that by getting rid of democracy, they will solve Tunisia's problems, which Saied exploited to justify his coup against democracy. We have seen that the situation has only exacerbated under him. We have seen the failure of his government to deal with the existing crisis. We have seen the deterioration of the social and economic crisis in Tunisia, and we have seen unprecedented problems, shortages, energy cuts, the shortages in necessary goods, and this has been reflected obviously in the increase in migration, which seems to be the only angle through which Europe has shown any interest in Tunisia. Some argue that Saied will not be reasoned with, and he will not give any attention to these pressures. However, it is obvious that any criticism is faced with hysterical reactions from Saied, as we have seen recently with a critical French documentary which criticized the situation in Tunisia and the mismanagement of the economy and the destruction of Tunisian democracy, which has been criticized and attacked by Saied and his supporters as an attack on Tunisia's sovereignty. We have seen also how Tunisia has denied a European parliamentary delegation entry to Tunisia. So we believe that pressure can be put on the government and on Saied to restore democracy in Tunisia through stronger statements, through visits, and this will be something that is not only in the interest of Tunisia, but of our neighbors and Tunisia's partners as well. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Yusra, pour votre introduction. Je laisse la parole à M. Elyes Chaouachi. Elyes Chaouachi, c'est le fils, comme je disais tout à l'heure, de Ghazi Chaouachi, que j'ai connu personnellement l'année dernière ici, pendant un séminaire à Genève, qui était présent, pour un petit peu essayer de regrouper les familles politiques, et puis avec la complication des ONG, pour trouver une issue à la Tunisie. J'ai connu une personnalité emblématique. Je l'ai connu personnellement, physiquement ici. C'est une personne très respectée, c'est une personne qui a une vision, une nouvelle vision pour la Tunisie, pour tout le monde, pas d'exclusion, pour que la Tunisie soit pour ses enfants par toutes les familles politiques. Je vous laisse la parole, Elyes.
Merci. Thank you all. Thank you for attending. Thanks for the organizers. Thank you, Rodney. Since we are here a few hundred meters from the UN building, I will stand before you today with a heavy heart, a heart burdened by the unjust persecution of my father since 376 days today, without any advancement or progress on this falsified case. My father, as described and introduced before, is a lawyer, ex-MP, ex-minister, who has been held as a political prisoner in Tunisia for over a year now, and he has been persecuted in a case of conspiracy against the internal security of the state, and classified as terrorist as well, which make think very ridiculous from a way and sad from the other way, because a man who was always peaceful and patriot and thinking about the interest of his country, and was leading a political party, social democratic one, and then he's finding himself classified as terrorist just because he has criticized this government, and especially the president who has made the coup in 2021. As well, this case of conspiracy, which is very known in Tunisia and abroad, because he has conducted many interviews and meetings with members of diplomats and ambassadors from different European countries as Italy, France, Spain, and as well the United States. And today, and he met even a lot of representatives of the United Nations in Tunisia. And then when he was putting on this affair with Shaima Isa, the mother of Shazeh, who is here, we didn't hear any voice from those countries, from those embassies. And then we start know that all values, all democratic principles, all human rights values were just an anchor in the blank by those countries. And we are really disappointed and upset to say that, but I think that's the truth, and that's what's happening. Then I would say, as a family member of political prisoner, I'm deeply disappointed of the lack of action for the United Nations. We just were in this building, and in the entrance we see the word peace translated in several languages, which make me laugh and made me upset as well, because we say peace, however we are not defending anything in Tunisia, at least. I know that last May 2023, the high representative of the United Nations was she was denied to get in Tunisia, and a second time another representative of the United Nations, I think in October, they were not welcome to get in Tunisia, and we didn't see any react. They didn't make anything. They didn't make any statement to just say that's an abuse, because Tunisia is member in the United Nations since more than 50 years from now, and we can see the flag of Tunisia next to other flags, behind Japan, and next to the English flag. So that's funny as well. Furthermore, I would say that it's disheartening to see countries like France and Italy, which are main representative, I would say, in the United Nations, continuing to cooperate with the authoritarian Tunisian regime, despite the clear evidence of repression, injustice, and tyranny as well. Their support only enables the regime of Saied to continue the campaign of arbitrary arrests and political persecution. As I said, it pains me a lot to see that some nations are supporting him and turning, as Yusra said, a blind eye to the repression and to all rampant done by this dictator in Tunisia. My father and his companions, including 7 other individuals, and I can quote their names, like Rida Belhaj, Aysam Shabi, Shaima Isa, Lazar Al-Akremi, Abdelhamid Jlasi, and Khayyam Turki, Jawhar Ben Barak as well, are social democrats of central left political side. I'm targeting on that at each time that I have the opportunity to speak, because I want to underline the stereotype saying that Saied is just arresting Islamists people. No, Saied is arresting all voices that is criticizing this regime. I'm also deeply troubled by the fact that political arrests have gone beyond just political figures and now includes family members. We know today that Kaouther, me, Aziz, Akremi, and Yusra Ghannouchi, we cannot go back to Tunisia even to see our family members. For myself, at least, I've been condemned with 3 years of prison last January, 1 month ago, and it's the first time that I'm making this statement, just because I've criticized Saied in the by a phone call that I made with a journalist, and I was criticizing him and defending the very bad persecution conditions that my father has. And as well, I would say that my mother, who works as a judge, was transferred arbitrarily from the tribunal, the cassation tribunal, when she is working, to another one lower ranked, and it's considered as professional, legal, moral, and the human attack and abuse. So this falls under the, I would say, gloating category, which makes our family distracted today. I'm living in France, exiled. My mother, she's supporting a lot of repression on her work. My father, who is in a prison. So yeah, that's Saied regime that United Nations, France, Italy, and all other countries who are speaking every day about democracy, about peace, about all humanitarian values. So they are dealing with him, continue dealing with him. Yesterday they just gave him a donation of 150 million euro to support him, to support those repression acts, which make them in a very bad situation, because one day I would say that this situation in Tunisia, it will never stay forever, because one day it will end, and everyone will be responsible of his part. Today I call the United Nations, since I'm always optimist, and that was the way that my parents educated me. I call the United Nations to intervene and engage with the Tunisian authorities to negotiate an end to this national ordeal, at least to ensure a fair and transparent judicial process for everyone, for all political parties, and to create a climate of political freedom and respect the human rights in the country, because we are high confident and sure that those charges for all our fathers and mothers are classified in a baseless and unfounded and falsified cases. I also urge the United Nations to use its diplomatic channels to negotiate for the release of all political parties and to ask for their main values, which is the dialogue and the coexistence, which is just an anchor in a blank as well. So we are seeking them and calling to make a big political dialogue in order to purify the political climate, and if I permit as well to address a message, if they are following us online, to the main figure of the opposition in Tunisia, to say, let us work together today and avoid all kind of ego in order to build, in order to seek for a main political figure alternative and to participate in the next presidential election with the fair conditions in order to make end to this authoritarian and dictatorship that we have in Tunisia today. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Elyes. Alors, c'est juste, avant de terminer, de passer la parole aux questions. Je rejoins le témoignage de nos enfants pour dire aussi que malheureusement, la Tunisie, après des décennies de dictature de Bourguiba à Ben Ali, le peuple tunisien vit des années de braise sous Saied. Si on a des noms, Rached Ghannouchi, Ghazi Chaouachi, Akremi, Chaouachi, c'est des noms, mais il faut voir ce que subissent derrière ces noms-là. C'est des familles, c'est des enfants, c'est des femmes, c'est des sœurs, c'est des proches, c'est des amis qui subissent cette dictature et ce harcèlement de ce psychopathe Saied. La Tunisie actuellement vit une période qu'elle n'a jamais vue dans son histoire. C'est un nouveau pharaon qui sort de nulle part. Et j'en profite avant, si vous m'excusez, de passer un message, parce que c'est très important. Les noms des juges qui sont à la botte de Saied, c'est des juges qui sont lâches. Quand vous citez leur nom en dehors de la Tunisie, ils tremblent là-bas en Tunisie. Alors je passe le message الزهير بن عبد الله، كريم الحاج، بشير المطوي، حنان كداس، مكرم جلاسي، أمال العتروس، منظر الأدب، منظر مخلوف، فوزي الوسلاتي، سمير الزوابي، ألفة الجمل، ليلى جفال، منظر الأدب، آسيا العياري وفوزية الرزقي. Votre tour viendra et vous ne pouvez plus jamais bénéficier de l'impunité. Vous serez poursuivis. C'est une promesse qu'on a faite. Il y a une vingtaine d'années, Yusra a cité le cas de Abdallah Khalel en 2001, qu'il a fui ici Genève sur un brancard. Vous y passerez. Je passe la parole s'il y a des questions dans la salle. Je vous en prie.
Bonjour tout le monde. Je voulais savoir juste la santé des détenus. Franchement, on sait qu'ils sont arrêtés, on sait tout, mais pas tout. On ne sait pas sur leur santé. Et est-ce qu'il y a une possibilité qu'ils sortent un jour? Voilà. Je pose la question à tout le monde. Merci.
Kaouther, Yusra, Elyes, allez-y. Répondez.
La santé des prisonniers politiques, bon, tout dépend de quel prisonnier politique. Chose est sûre que physiquement, ils subissent plus des tortures physiques, mais mentalement, ils en subissent beaucoup. Pour le cas de mon père, si je me permets, Ghazi Chaouachi par exemple, il est toujours privé de lecture. Il n'a pas le droit à la lecture. On ne sait pas pourquoi. On ne connaît pas la raison. Et aussi, après la grève de la faim qu'ils ont fait à 2 reprises, il a été hospitalisé 2 fois. Il a des problèmes de santé, notamment le cholestérol. Il a une arthrose cervicale. Il a des problèmes, des douleurs au niveau du dos. Et voilà, ça continue. Il est toujours patient, toujours optimiste. Parfois, on perd des hauts et des bas en ce qui concerne l'espoir, mais il y a toujours une volonté de continuer et de résister contre ce régime autoritaire. C'est parce qu'à la fin, c'est un combat moral, c'est un combat psychologique que physique. Et je donne la parole aux autres si jamais ils veulent parler de la situation sanitaire.
Hello. With regards to my father's conditions, I think I touched on it earlier. The first 10 months, he was in an overcrowded cell. He had some health problems, and the prison wouldn't always attend to it. It would always have to reach to the point where he needs the hospital. They denied him medicine, they denied him certain dietary requirements. However, psychologically, people who have visited my father have said how surprised they were by how strong he was, how morally, his morale was high, he's very positive. And so that was always helpful. But my father this isn't his first time. He survived Ben Ali's prison. With regards to whether if we think he's gonna be released, this is, for all our family here, it's a political situation, it's not legal. So all the cases are falsified, the evidence is falsified. So the only hope I have is a regime change. It's not going to happen. I mean, we've seen what they've done with the judges. Most of the people, everyone who's in prison actually, their files are empty. So my only hope is if Qais and his cronies leave. Otherwise, it's not going to. I don't think it's going to happen through whatever legal system which doesn't exist at the moment.
And if I can just add that the African court, when they made their order for provisional measures, specifically highlighted the fact that the detainees should be able to get doctors of their own choosing and access to them for medical care. And that was because of all the evidence we had put before the court of the exact abuses and violations that you're hearing about now. So the court did order that, and we have gone back to the court to explain that it hasn't been implemented. The situation hasn't changed. It's only got worse, together with all the other conditions that they haven't fulfilled. So we are making that a very prominent part of the case at the African court. And Tunisia is bound by the orders of the court. It has to follow them. Now, we know they're not, but if they are not doing so, then the African Union and countries in Africa and the UN countries as well should be intervening, because if a state won't comply with court orders, then it is for the AU, the EU, the UN bodies to take action, to impose sanctions, to stop diplomatic relations, to use all the measures to isolate the government. And just one other thing to add as well is that when you go to the African court, you have to show that all the remedies have been exhausted. And we've been able to clearly show that you can't get a fair trial. There's no way that, this is as Kaouther is saying, there's just no way you can challenge things in the court system. You can't appeal. The Constitutional Court doesn't exist and it's not functioning anymore. So you therefore have to go outside to the African courts. You have to come here to the UN, because it's not going to happen internally. It's for the international community to take that responsibility, together, of course, with everyone within Tunisia. But it's that joint action, it's only that joint action that is going to solve the problem.
Thank you. On donne la parole à Aziz, si elle est avec nous. Juste un témoignage, juste une réponse, un témoignage sur la situation de son père. Bechir Akremi, est-ce qu'il est toujours avec nous?
Yeah, I'm here.
Tu nous entends, Aziz?
Yes, I can.
Voilà, on aimerait bien aussi, voilà, votre témoignage sur la situation de Bechir Akremi, votre papa, Inch'Allah.
Well, my father was first tortured, unfortunately, as soon as he was arrested. He was kept in a room without any bed or any sheets in February for like more than a week. And then he had a mental breakdown and was forcefully then taken to the mental hospital. He was denied help from the hospital and was then forced into prison. He has since been much better, yet the psychological toll of sitting in a Tunisian prison while being completely innocent for a judge who simply understands the law very, very well and understands the charges and the normal way that the court system works is simply heartbreaking, and it's been really difficult. Plus the fact that the Tunisian regime has gone out of his way to make life as difficult as possible. Every single one of the people that were arrested are being given terrorism charges, which basically forces the prison system to deal with you differently because you're considered a very high-profile criminal. Imagine this. Imagine being a judge that has worked more than 30 years and then having to be dealt with just like a terrorist that has terrorized and killed innocents. Same with the lawyers that has been arrested. Same with the parents of the attendees here. All of them has been given charges that are terrorist related from the anti-terrorism poll judges, which means that they're being dealt with absolutely horrendously. Just like my father said when he was arrested in a video from the hospital, he said, Aziz, the treatment is disgusting. And it really stayed disgusting up until this day. I really hope that the international community would step in to even look at the state of the prisons, look at the state of these people that has served their countries and served the international community by their honesty and their hard work. And just pay attention, because I believe that prison is simply a slow killer everywhere. But in Tunisia, it's even worse because it is designed right now by the Tunisian regime to kill you slowly, to try to get rid of you as fast as possible, unfortunately.
Merci Aziz. Une question?
Oui, une question. Bonjour à tout le monde. Merci pour ces interventions. L'AVTT, l'Association des victimes de torture, avec vous, Maître Dixon, avec d'autres ONG, on a déposé pas mal de plaintes. On a déposé des plaintes au rapporteur spécial pour l'indépendance du juge et des avocats, au rapporteur spécial pour la détention arbitraire. Vous aussi, on a vu que vous étiez aussi tribunal de l'Union africaine, et on a pas mal des activités envers ce système de l'ONU. Ma question à Aziz, vous, comme famille de détenus politiques en Tunisie, quel est votre message à ce système? Je pose la question à Aziz concernant la rapporteure spéciale de l'indépendance du juge et des avocats. Normalement, elle devrait visiter la Tunisie le 16 ou le 26 mai, mais elle n'a pas eu l'autorisation. Aussi, pour vous, comme famille de détenus, comment vous regardez ce système? Quel est votre message? Nous sommes à 5 minutes de l'ONU, du Conseil des droits de l'homme, la session 55e session des droits de l'homme. Quel est votre message à l'ONU, au Conseil des droits de l'homme, à l'Union internationale de parlement qu'on va visiter après, à tout ce système de l'ONU? Comment vous voyez les choses et quel est votre message? Merci.
Merci beaucoup.
Okay. So I would start. First of all, my father knows the United Nations halls and has worked really extensively with the international community. He has worked with more than 13 countries when it comes to the terrorist attacks of Bardo and Sousse. Afterwards, when he was general prosecutor, he has worked extensively with France and with Italy, handling many hundreds of cases. My father is also a very well-trained anti-terrorism judge who knows, who's well-renowned by the UN and has done many seminars and has spoken in many universities all over Europe, teaching teaching students the new ways and the new methods of anti-terrorism. The fact that after all that work, after all that international recognition, after catching hundreds of terrorism, after basically being one of the pillars in Tunisians' fight against terrorism, and by extension, Europe's fight against terrorism, we need to understand that terrorism anywhere in the world is a threat to people everywhere in the world. If Tunisia became a hub for terrorism, we're right next to Europe. So my father was responsible in helping end this evil. And for him to be completely abandoned by every single international structure, completely abandoned by structures that we have been put in place exactly for this. The United Nations Council of Human Rights, its job to stop injustice like this. And by extension, the rapporteur for judicial independence, after we've sent her many letters, and after we've urged her to visit Tunisia, she was rejected by the Tunisian government. And instead of fighting back, instead of doing any sort of announcement, she simply stood silent. This is heartbreaking and disappointing. This is happening all under the massive umbrella of what's happening in the entire world, of countries simply abandoning their most basic principles. And it's incredibly worrying. We cannot let ourselves slip back into oppression. We cannot betray humanity in this way. My father is a judge, and a very highly esteemed judge, and he deserves that the international community be grateful for the work he did and at least investigate what's happening in Tunisia. So I urge any UN official in attendance or anyone listening to please pay attention to what's happening in Tunisia and please try to restore some sort of justice for these victims that have been prosecuted for simply standing up for the independence of judicial powers. Thank you.
Merci Aziz.
Yeah.
Donc, on souhaite que tous les défendeurs de la démocratie et de l'état de liberté de se mobiliser à nos côtés pour un retour au régime inclusif démocratique et la libération de tous les prisonniers.
I will just add, as family member, political prisoner, this organization, the UN, known for its defense of human rights, failed, at least today, to address the plight of my father and of many other political prisoners, as all political prisoners that we already quoted, and other that were not quoted and not participated here from their family members. You just quote that reports indicate that some United Nations reporters and members were denied access to Tunisia, hindering the effort to investigate and to report for the human rights violation occurring there under the oppressive regime. My message, my second message to them, even if I did one in my first intervention, I call the United Nations to intervene and engage with the Tunisian authorities to negotiate the release of political prisoners, at least to negotiate to launch or to kick off a national dialogue and a national dialogue, because we know that communication and debate are main keys of the United Nations values, and this is included on their internal chart. If I'm not mistaken, it's the Article 6 or the Article 8 that I reviewed yesterday night. And as well, we know that in 2013 we made general national political and social debate in Tunisia, where at least 99% of political parties were participating in, and it generated a good fruit, which was Nobel Prize. So nothing can I would say it's always possible to make this debate, to make this national dialogue, and it's going to be a win-win strategy even for Kais Saied as authoritarian. Thank you.
So I just wanted to say that the task of restoring democracy is for Tunisians themselves, just as they toppled the dictatorship of Ben Ali themselves, although Ben Ali had been at the time welcomed abroad, and he was praised, and Tunisia was praised as an economic miracle, and suddenly in 2011 they discovered that actually it was full of profound crises. However, our message, so that task is for Tunisians, and we are here a testimony to the Tunisians who are refusing to accept the return of dictatorship and who are willing to sacrifice their freedom and face prison to restore democracy to Tunisia. But our message to nations that profess commitment to democracy and human rights, to prove that commitment and not to repeat the mistakes of the past, and to not give these dictators the support, the military funding that we are seeing in Tunisia, and the legitimacy that they crave. Because if we look at the situation in terms of values, it is clear that any support to Kais Saied and his regime would be a betrayal of these values. And if we look at it from the angle of interests, then it is not in anyone's interest to repeat the same mistake and to push the situation to reach a new explosion, a new revolution. Because if you look at the situation in Tunisia, however many problems there were in the decade of the democratic transition, cannot be compared to the current situation, which is leading to widespread despair. So this is not going to be in anyone's interest either.
Thank you very much. Juste une dernière question. Allez-y, je vous en prie.
J'aimerais bien revenir sur la question de la santé des détenus. J'aimerais bien vous parler de Khayem Turki qui est malade, qui ne peut même pas bouger sa main, de Abdelhamid Jlassi, et vous pouvez voir le témoignage de sa femme, de Ali Al-Arayev, de Cheve aussi, qui sont très malades et qui n'ont pas eu l'accès aux soins nécessaires. Merci.
Juste pour ces cas-là, exactement, j'aimerais bien poser la dernière question à Maître Dixon. S'il vous plaît, Maître, comment peut-on profiter du mécanisme qui a été adopté par le Parlement européen en 2021, décembre 2021, le mécanisme de Magnitsky, pour faciliter un petit peu les procédures judiciaires pour déposer des plaintes en Europe?
Yes, thank you for the question. We have, with the European Union, used the human rights sanctions regime to apply for sanctions to be imposed against Tunisian officials, including Saied himself and a number of his ministers, because the sanctions regime exists in order to specifically focus on the individuals who are committing the human rights violations. So not to sanction the state or the people as a whole, of course not, but to sanction those who are most responsible for what is happening. So that is a very effective mechanism that can be used. The difficulty is that you have to get all states of the EU to agree before such sanctions can be imposed. It has happened before in relation to certain countries like China, like Russia. So the EU has been able to get the consensus to do it. And we have made an application based on exactly those precedents where they've done it before, to say they should do it in this situation as well, because the violations are similar. The human rights violations we're talking about are no different. So there can be no justification for making a distinction. So there is that route that we are following, and we are continuing to press that and to add more evidence to that application as well. Of course, the EU itself can also take action as a political body. It can act through its sanctions regime, which is the first step it should take. But it can then also itself take action as a united body against Tunisia and impose its own sanctions. Countries can also do it bilaterally as well, but it's so much more powerful when it comes from a united bloc. But so far we're seeing fragmentation. There isn't a united approach. If what was happening in Tunisia now was happening in any European country, you could be sure that there would be an outcry. But instead, because it's far away, it's in Africa, the approach is, well, we shouldn't interfere. And there are other interests at play as well. So, you know, this is a major contradiction that the EU has to address. I mean, it should at least single out people for sanctions, but it must have a united policy on promoting democracy, surely. I mean, if that's the founding principle and set of values, it must be doing that throughout the world, not only in its own countries.
Thank you very much. Je pense qu'on clôture cette conférence. Tout d'abord, je tiens à remercier les intervenants. Je sais que ce n'est pas facile de témoigner, surtout pour des personnes qui nous sont très chères. Je vous remercie pour ce courage, je vous remercie pour votre combat. On est tous ensemble en combat contre la dictature, contre cette nouvelle forme de dictature un petit peu qui n'a jamais été connue en Tunisie, dans l'histoire de la Tunisie. Et puis, juste, j'annonce que nos invités, ils ont une réunion très importante avec l'Union interparlementaire internationale à Genève pour aussi parler de la cause du président du Parlement, de Ghazi Chaouachi en tant que député, de Saied Ferjani en tant que député légitime, qui sont toujours légitimes, de la session 2019-2024. Je vous remercie pour votre intention et à la prochaine. Merci beaucoup.